The sun glinted off the sidewalks of Vallejo, California, on the morning of August 10, 2000, a date that meant everything to 8-year-old Midsi Sanchez. It was her birthday. She had been counting down the days for weeks, excited for the party her family had planned that afternoon. The balloons, the cake, the presents of friends and siblings. Her home was just 1 block away from her school, and even though she usually walked with her brother and sister, she decided this time on this special day, she'd head home alone. It was her way of showing how grown-up she felt. The streets were familiar. Just trees, parked cars, and the occasional neighbor sweeping leaves from the curb. But then, a beat-up sedan pulled up near the corner. The driver was a white man in his late 30s or early 40s, with stringy brown hair and a face that bore no emotion. He leaned over and called out to her. "Hey, can you help me pick something up? I dropped some tools under the car." Midsi paused. Her instincts twitched, but she was young and raised to be helpful. The man didn't seem dangerous, just a stranger needing help. She nodded, took a step closer, and bent down slightly to look under the car. That's when it all changed. In a blink, his hands were on her, tight, rough, unrelenting. He shoved her into the passenger side of the vehicle, slammed the door and sped off. By the time Midsi realized what had happened, they were already out of her neighborhood. Home time slowed. Minutes passed, then hours. Midsi's mother began to worry when the clock neared 3 and her daughter hadn't arrived. Panic set in when the siblings admitted they hadn't seen her at all. Police were called. Vallejo PD quickly launched a missing persons case, but with no eyewitnesses, no video footage, and no description of the car, they were starting from zero. The town was immediately gripped with fear. Missing child flyers flooded lampposts and bulletin boards. Local news stations interrupted broadcasts with bulletins. Her schoolmates and neighbors formed search parties, walking miles with flashlights through woods and abandoned buildings. But each lead came up empty. For Midsi, the nightmare had only begun. The car had stopped in a wooded area not far from a trailer park. The man, later identified as Curtis Dean Anderson, forced her into a run-down mobile trailer filled with dirty clothes, tools, and the musty stench of cigarettes. He tied her hands with rope and kept her locked inside. He didn't speak much, only barked orders and threatened her if she cried. And Midsi, terrified as she was, held back tears. But in her mind something clicked. She had to survive. Over the next 3 days she began to observe him. His routines, the way he locked the door where he placed his keys. While he fell asleep drunk on the couch, she noticed that he often forgot to double-check the restraints on her feet. She began subtly loosening them each night. What she didn't know, what no one did at the time, was that Anderson was already under suspicion for multiple other disappearances. He had been on and off law enforcement radar since the mid-90s, but never enough evidence had stuck. He was the textbook definition of a predator. Manipulative, calm under pressure, and deeply disturbed. If Midsi didn't escape, there was little hope she ever would. On the 3rd morning, as the sun rose through the crack in the curtains, Midsi made her move. Anderson had forgotten to tie her hands the night before. The back door of the trailer was always locked, but this time the lock hadn't clicked shut properly. She quietly crept to the door, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She turned the knob slowly, clicked open, ran through the trailer park, barefoot, toward the first house she could find. An elderly woman answered the door as Midsi burst into tears, explaining who she was. The woman called the police immediately. Within minutes, officers swarmed the area. Curtis Dean Anderson was arrested without incident, trying to slip out of the back of the trailer with a duffel bag of clothes. But it was already too late for escape. As detectives pieced together Anderson's background, the horror deepened. Inside his trailer and car, they found girls' clothes that didn't belong to Midsi. Photos, items taken from other children. A diary of sorts with disturbing entries about stalking and abducting minors. He admitted to several other crimes, abductions, rapes, even murders. He later confessed to killing 7-year-old Sienna Fairchild, a case that had haunted California investigators since 1999. Midsi had survived one of California's most dangerous serial killers. Her bravery stunned the country. The media swarmed to tell her story. Investigators credited her escape with cracking open one of the most elusive cases they'd ever faced. But for Midsi, the trauma didn't fade easily. The nightmares, the flashbacks, the anxiety, they lingered. Yet she chose to speak out. By the age of 18, she began working with missing children's organizations and speaking to schools about safety. The scars never disappeared, but neither did her courage. In 2007, Curtis Dean Anderson died of natural causes while serving time in prison. But because of Midsi Sanchez, other children were saved. She became a living example that even in the darkest, most terrifying moments, there is room for bravery. Her story became a lesson in vigilance, in strength, and in how a single act of resistance can shatter a monster's legacy. Inside the Vallejo Police Department's interview room, the air was cold and stale. Detectives sat across from Curtis Dean Anderson, a man who looked eerily calm for someone accused of abducting a child. He wore a smirk, as if daring them to uncover what he hadn't yet confessed. But as investigators pushed, details started slipping. Anderson began to talk. Not just about Midsi but about others. Places. She wasn't the first, he muttered. And she probably wouldn't have been the last. He gave chilling descriptions of his methods. How he'd target little girls walking alone. How he used kindness as bait. How he always made sure to leave no trace. That's when detectives made a terrifying connection. Among the cases still haunting Northern California was that of Sienna Fairchild, a 7-year-old who had vanished just 8 months before. Her backpack had been found, but nothing more. Anderson, now backed into a corner, admitted that he'd taken her too. "We were driving near Santa Clara," he said. "She screamed too loud." No remains had been found yet, but investigators now had a confession. A search team was deployed into remote forested areas based on his vague directions. A few months later, in early 2001, a human skull was discovered near the Sierra foothills. DNA confirmed what everyone feared. It was Sienna. Back in Vallejo, Midsi struggled to return to normal life. The balloons and cake from her birthday party were long gone, untouched. She refused to sleep alone. At school, classmates stared, unsure of what to say to the girl who'd survived a monster. Her parents were terrified to leave her side, but they also marveled at her strength. She wasn't just a victim. She was a fighter. Word of her courage spread quickly. National media picked up the story. CNN aired segments. Oprah wanted an interview. But more than attention, what followed was a movement. School districts across California revised their stranger danger policies. Law enforcement agencies trained officers using Midsi's case as an example. And Midsi herself began to speak. At just 9 years old, she stood before a gymnasium of other kids and said, "If someone takes you, don't wait for someone else to save you. Find a way." It was the first time anyone in the room had heard an elementary schooler talk like that. Her voice shook, but she meant every word. In 2001, Curtis Dean Anderson was sentenced to over 250 years in prison. His cold demeanor never changed in court, even as Midsi's family gave their tearful statements. He smirked when the judge handed down the sentence, as if proud of his notoriety. Midsi, just 9 at the time, watched from the back of the courtroom, small but unshaken. Over the next few years, her life was a mix of therapy sessions, interviews, and awards for bravery. But it was hard. PTSD lingered. Loud noises startled her. Doors had to remain unlocked. Yet through it all, Midsi pushed forward. At 13, she started writing about what happened. By 15, she was traveling to schools across California, speaking to kids her age about personal safety and resilience. She wasn't just healing herself, she was trying to protect others. Meanwhile, Anderson died in prison in 2007 from natural causes, taking the full truth of his crimes to the grave. Authorities believe he may have abducted or killed dozens more. But Midsi lived. She survived. And by her strength alone, she stopped a serial killer. If you're drawn to chilling true crime stories, emotional survivor accounts, and gripping investigative documentaries, you're in the right place. Subscribe, like, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that stays with you long after the screen fades to black.